Move on to breaking down the barriers, and I'm going to ask our chair, Dianne, to come into the session. So Dianne is with Natural England, and she's going to be leading us through our presentations today. Thanks, Dianne. Oh, just quickly unmute, if that's okay.
Apologies.
There you are. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Welcome to this next panel discussion exploring how we can remove some of the key barriers to the widespread implementation of river buffers as part of nature-based solutions. This is another really packed agenda. We've got 4 great talks lined up, which should promote some really good discussion. So please use the Q&A function to submit or like a question, and we'll put as many of those as we can to the panel following all 4 talks. And please also use the chat for discussion. Our panel speakers are Karen Gibbs, who is Head of Environment at the Consumer Council for Water. She's presenting some recent research findings on the public support and willingness to pay for nature-based solutions. Emma Jackson-Gray is the coordinator for the North Essex Farm Cluster and will share her experiences of partnership working and also her thoughts on countryside stewardship. We then have Kat Robinson, a biodiversity officer for the Environment Agency, talking about how local plan policies can be used to secure ecological buffers. And lastly, Dan Turner, the technical lead at the Rivers Trust, will talk on the opportunities for blended finance. So I will now hand over to Karen, who will start us off.
Oh, I think we're actually just missing Karen. I wonder if someone else can go first. I might call up Dan Turner if he doesn't mind. He's always our favourite person.
Sorry, I didn't realise that Karen wasn't with us. Perhaps Emma.
I've just got Dan here.
Okay.
So
yep.
Dan, if you're all right to go ahead. Thanks, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll just share my screen. Can we all see that?
Yes, Dan.
Good stuff. Okay. Hi, yeah, I'm Dan Turner from the Rivers Trust, technical lead for land management and environmental markets. And today I'm going to talk to you about blended finance as a way to overcome barriers to nature-based solutions. So we know that financing nature-based solutions is one of the main barriers to delivering at scale and pace that is required. The Financing Gap for UK Nature report released in 2021 by the Green Finance Institute found that between 44 billion to 97 billion above current public sector commitments is required to address our nature-related outcomes in the next 10 years. And what of those outcomes, clean water, restoring biodiversity and reducing flood risk requires significant amounts of investment, and all of which we know nature-based solutions can play a significant role. But we can't rely solely on public funding and must look at new approaches that can attract private investment for nature recovery. The Rivers Trust are involved with developing several market-led initiatives that are looking at bringing in private finance. And the real challenge is, how do we meet the needs of the environment, business, farmers and landowners to make this work? So the starting point for me is always what the environment needs, because it's central to our health, well-being and ability to thrive. We are all very aware of the climate and biodiversity crisis, but we also face a myriad of other issues such as soil degradation, declining public health, lack of social mobility, and a housing crisis, all putting pressure on our fragile catchments and landscapes. So we need, solutions that can take a more joined up and systems approach. Business operations rely on nature. Failure to act could lead to extensive nature loss, the kind that would result in widespread systemic risk and shock to the economy. And businesses are beginning to understand their nature-related dependencies. However, if we want to attract private investment, we must understand and demonstrate how we can reduce their risks and meet their requirements. And similarly, farmers and landowners understand the value of nature. 80% of farmers believe the health of the natural environment is important or very important for their farm business, and it underpins their business. However, changing subsidies, global events, and climate change are all putting the agricultural sector under huge pressure. So we must look at supporting farmers to transition to more sustainable and regenerative practices, while also recognising the need to produce food. So the key to unlocking private finance is how do we bring all of this together, and find that sweet spot where everybody benefits. So how could this approach apply to river buffers? So the key to understanding what a network of buffers along rivers in the UK could bring, such as meeting our public commitments. So we have nature recovery targets of creating and restoring 500 hectares of wildlife-rich habitats outside protected areas. So a statutory regulatory baseline of a 6-metre buffers could contribute up to 3% of this target. We have 30-30 targets where the government has committed to managing 30% of the land for nature, where over 75% of the area in riparian buffers is within Natural England's combined habitat networks maps, and key to meeting these aims. Net zero targets, where the government has committed to reach net zero by 2050. We've also got flood risk targets, where the government has committed to doubling the number of government-funded projects that include nature-based solutions to reduce flooding, and water quality commitments like nutrient neutrality legislation, where new housing developments in certain areas should not add more nutrient pollution to water catchments. But also we understand that water quality issues resulting from the agricultural sector are estimated a cost of 1.3 billion per annum, and is the primary reason for a third of water bodies failing to meet WFD objectives. But we also know that river buffers provide a range of benefits to the private sector, from increasing resilience to supply chains, reducing the risk of flooding, meeting their net zero and ESG targets, and providing solutions to nutrient neutrality through off-site credits. So we know there are significant sources of finance from the public sector, especially if we align that to new agricultural subsidies, and there are many private sector drivers. So if we are clever, we can blend these sources of finance to achieve our ambition of establishing a network of buffers along our rivers.
Thank you, Dan. That was a really interesting talk, and some good opportunities there. So if we can now go to our next speaker.
Hi there, thanks Diane. My name's Emma Gray, and I'm just going to share my screen so you can see. But along with my husband Joe, hopefully you can see that, we farm up in North Essex. We farm on the River Pants, which then becomes the Blackwater, which is a large river that runs west to east right through the central part of Essex. And Joe and I, as well as running our family farm, we also run the North Essex Farm Cluster. So we are an independent farmer-led cluster. We've been going about 18 months now, and we're essentially a group of farmers and landowners working together, really looking at delivering benefits for soil, water, wildlife throughout our river catchments. Our area is quite large. We've currently got around 18,000 hectares of farmland are committed to the farm cluster, and that's sort of growing every week. Really, we're bringing new farmers on board. And what's really interesting about our farm cluster is that we are very much farmer-led. So that helps us bring farms on board because we can kind of shortcut some of the questions that farmers might have about this kind of nature recovery work, because we are ourselves farming within that community. So as a farm cluster, what we do is we provide access to funding, project management, events, training. We have a kind of social element to what we do. But at the heart of our work is we're trying to aggregate environmental work across a network of farms so we can reach a real landscape scale level of impact through what we're doing. So we've been going for about 18 months, as I said, and really the farm cluster acts as a kind of central point for funders, both in the private and public sector, who are interested in working with our farmers and landowners on nature recovery work. And the first sort of big project that we've been involved in is called the Pant Valley Pilot. So this was a project designed.
Emma,
Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. And we
Okay.
can't see your slides, unfortunately. So I just wanted to check to see if we could try and share them again.
Yes, sure thing.
Sorry, thank you.
That's all right. Thank you for pointing it out. Let's
No
try.
problem.
I do share. Oh, hang on. This is looking more promising.
Yes, perfect.
Can you see
So
that?
sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right. Okay, can you see it full screen?
It's just coming through, I think.
There we go. Can you see it there?
Yes, I can now. Thank you. Thanks, Emma.
That's all right. So I covered most of that on that first slide. So there we are, all in our natural habitat with our farm cluster members. And I was just about to talk about the Pant Valley Pilot project. So this is our first landscape scale recovery project that we've been working on as a farm cluster. It's centred around a 10-kilometre stretch of the River Pant from Braintree upstream to Wethersfield and Finchingfield. We picked this area because it's an area that's been designated a climate kind of action area by Essex County Council. And there's also some really interesting work going on at Spains Hall within this section, who have recently, working with the Environment Agency, built a beaver enclosure and are using beavers to do some natural flood management work. So it made sense to kind of pick this really interesting stretch of the river. And we've got a project going on here that was designed by basically contacting all of the farmers that are all within our cluster that have river frontage along this stretch. And we took a drone up and flew it over the farms in the area, and we had a look at where we thought we might be able to do some buffering or some habitat creation alongside the river and on the streams and tributaries, and bring that together into a kind of project that made sense across the landscape in that area. We then went out and designed our project. We based on this kind of wish list of what the farmers wanted to see, and also working with partners in the area. And we managed to get some funding secured to deliver the work. And we're about halfway through the delivery phase of that at the moment. Really importantly, this project was farmer designed. So all the farmers were really involved right from the beginning. And once we had a project design, we then sort of took it to the funders and said, this is what we think we can achieve. Who can work with us to make this a reality? And in a minute, I'll touch on the partnerships that came together to make that happen. We've also, in the project, made sure that there was some capacity for maintenance factored in. And we also were making sure that at the moment we're achieving what we've set out in this project on sort of marginal land. So it's not super productive land. It's not asking farmers to take out areas that are profitable for growing crops. It's the more marginal land that we're working on. Which, when we're bringing farmers on board, starting with those areas makes sense. So as part of the project, we're creating or restoring 34 ponds in this landscape. We've got a couple of silvopastoral schemes in an agroforestry area being developed. We've got some double width wildlife corridors being made that are joining up some triple SI woodlands in the area, 2 big natural flood management schemes. and lots of hedgerow being planted or restored. Now, partnership working here has been really, really essential. And on the screen here, you can see that the project has come together with funding and support from all the agencies listed there. And what that support looks like varies from agency to agency. So we've had grants, we've had sort of expertise donated, we've been able to link into other pots of money. So some of the pond work is being linked to district level licensing funding that came through FWAG. So it's really the role of the farm cluster has been to be the central point for holding on to the funding, for brokering the partnerships, for brokering the funding agreements, and being that sort of buffer, if you like, between all of the funders and the farmers that are willing to deliver this work. So as I say, we're about halfway through developing this project, but it's been really interesting to start with what the farmers would like to do and what they've got capacity to do, getting them together and then taking the ideas out and seeing how we can get that funded, rather than trying to fit it into existing funding schemes. We're trying to kind of fit that on the head and say, like, if we can provide this kind of landscape scale to you by bringing a group of farmers together, how can you work with us flexibly from a funding point of view? So that's been really interesting to work on. The other things that we do as a farm cluster is look at encouraging farmers and landowners to take up some of the agri-environment schemes that are out there, some of the ELMS offers. And in terms of kind of river buffers, we're really excited about some of the SFI options that are coming along this year. So many of our farmers, particularly after what's been a very wet winter, are looking at their land either side of the rivers and waterways within the catchment and saying, actually, it's come to a point now, I'm ready to not, this is not suitable any longer for growing agricultural cereal crops. Let's have a look at what else we can do. And that's where this SFI funding that's coming in is so important, because it makes it a viable option. And I've just highlighted some of the actions that are coming there with the per hectare per year income that's available for farmers. And what's nice about working with the farm cluster is for some of these farmers to achieve some of the actions that are listed there, they're going to need some capital funding or other support. And that's where the farm cluster can come in, and we can work with water companies, the Environment Agency and others to say, look, we can fund some of the capital work to get you in a position to take up these actions. And that's been a really interesting way of working for us. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour of us as a farm cluster. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Emma. That was really insightful. And I'm sure it will promote some questions. So if we can now pass to Kat, if you're ready.
Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen, hopefully. Is that shared?
I can't actually see anything.
No, sorry, Kat, that hasn't shared just yet. Oh, it looks like something's coming now. Yes, perfect.
Is that gone? Brilliant.
Yes.
Okay.
Grand, thank you.
So hi everyone, I'm Kat Robinson. I'm a National Biodiversity Advisor at the Environment Agency. Previous to my national role, I was an area biodiversity officer, and a large part of that role was looking at planning applications and local plan policies, and just to see where we could strengthen things for the water environment. So often when you think, well, personally, when I think of developments and watercourses, these are the sort of images which spring to mind. We've got a nice car park right up to the top of the bank, nice bit of concrete bank work there, gardens backing onto them, or the some developments where the watercourse was always used as a bit of a boundary. So it was hidden behind fences, a bit of scrub. The long-term management of the watercourse and the areas which weren't developed weren't secured through management plans. Have heavily manicured buffers. One of these examples has actually got a clear span bridge, which is great, but the management of the riparian zone is pretty poor. There doesn't look to be
any enhancements really secured for that reach of the channel. And one of the bottom images is a watercourse which was put through a culvert because it didn't fit in with the open space that was planned. So when we're looking at planning, one of the most important documents locally is the local plans. These are 10-year plans. They do follow a specific process which is set out in the National Planning Policy Framework. This is quite a big document and it covers lots of different aspects of local development, so employment, housing, natural environment and things like that. And it gives the local planning authority guidance to see how they should be writing their policies and to help them guide them through making planning decisions for individual applications. One of the important bits of the text in the National Planning Policy Framework is that the plans need to be shaped by early, proportionate and effective engagement between plan makers, communities and local organisations and state statutory consultees, which is everybody on the call, so we all get a say in what happens in our local environment. Once the local plan has been adopted, you can then have a look at what the ambition is for the local planning authority, and as you can imagine, it varies greatly. So this is an example of what I found to be quite a typical local plan policy. And this is a general catch-all type policy for biodiversity and natural environment. Some of the sort of keywords in here we have are things, so developments are expected, they're encouraged. This particular one just looks at existing ecological networks. And so when you're looking at development proposals, you can sort of use the main policy text to see what betterment you can get. But one of the flaws of this, in my opinion, is that this local plan policy contains where possible. Sort of who decides that? Is it the developer or is it the local authority? And then you have that element of negotiation. So when I was an area officer, I covered the Vale of Aylesbury, and we knew that their local plan was up for review, and so we started conversations with the local planning authority ecologists and through the catchment partnership as well, and we looked at what we could do to really strengthen the local plan policies for watercourses, and it was a real partnership effort, and without the support of the local authority ecologists we just wouldn't have been able to make much. So this is an example, in my opinion, of a really good local plan policy. It's specifically for river and stream corridors, and it starts off with strong language. It goes straight in with a must not. And as you can see, it sort of goes through. It sets out really clear expectations of what the local planning authority are looking for. It's got conserve and enhance, good design. A great bit of this is exploring opportunities for deculverting watercourses, and they should be actively pursued, not just considered, dismissed and forgotten about. They should be actively pursued. And then the next bit down is sort of setting out that if culverts are being proposed, then the local planning authority would not be supportive, and that also that the development shouldn't prevent deculverting happening in the future, and that's really important. So you couldn't put a building over an existing culvert, because that means that it's very unlikely it's ever going to be able to be deculverted again. The other great bit of wording in here is talking about the buffers, and we managed to get the planners to agree that it was an ecological buffer. It's not just a buffer from the built footprint. It's not a buffer from a car park or anything like that. It has to be managed as a buffer. So you can't include formal landscaping, you can't include car parks, because everything's sort of being set back. And then the last bit is including a long-term management plan, and it's specifically for the buffer. With some of the ecological management plans which are submitted with planning applications, the watercourse and this buffer area are included in the wider management. And so then you can have, if the mowing regime of an open space near a watercourse, it then tends to, in my experience, encroach further and further towards the watercourse. So you lose all of the good stuff which you've hopefully managed to negotiate. The other thing with the local plan policies is they have supporting paragraphs. And in the Vale of Aylesbury local plan, there's a hook in there for what's called a water advice note. And this goes into more detail. It gives more guidance to developers about what the local planning authority is expecting. It gives information about in-stream enhancements that they would like to see, and then sort of the specifics of no invasive non-native species, and if you find them, what they would expect you to do, the bridge designs and general things like that. So it really gives the developer a look up front with what the local planning authority is expecting. So it's really good, and the idea of this is to hopefully increase the quality of the planning consultations, the planning applications which come in near watercourses. So Vale of Aylesbury local, the Vale of Aylesbury are not the only local plan which have these buffers. These are the ones which I know of. Cool, thank you. So the top 4 all have a 10 metre buffer, and these are buffers, the ecological buffers, or they are buffers for biodiversity. So as I said, they can't be gardens, they can't be a formal open spaces. And then Guildford has their 8 metre. And we are pretty sure that High Wycombe was the first local authority which had a policy like this. Theirs was for 8 metres. So the top photos are the full photos of the River Wye, and then the bottom photos are the of when the developer was putting in the enhancements. So we had the removal of hard bank, we had the removal of the heavy shade. They had in-stream enhancements included there as well. And again, the important thing is that through their local plan policy, we managed to secure good long-term management of the channel and of the buffer. But it does link with the previous talk about the partnership working, as it's so important to get everybody involved, and it helps the council, I think, where if it's a lone voice asking for a 10-metre buffer, they don't really know where it's come from, whereas if you build up those relationships and work as a catchment partnership to help push them through, it can just make all the difference. That's me, Dianne.
Okay, thank you, Kat, and thank you for another really interesting talk, and to all the speakers for their talks. Unfortunately, our last panelist is Karen Gibbs is unable to join us, so we will go to some questions, and there have been a few good questions put into the Q&A, but I'm just going to start off with one and to the panel, and that is so if we can have the panel on camera, please, that would be great. But my question is there a risk that by focusing on river buffers, it will reinforce the view that the river is from the bank top to the bank top, and that they are seen as a panacea for all of the issues that we have with our rivers, when they are only part of the solution, or they only address the symptom? And I think this is particularly relevant to green finance, so I'm going to ask Dan, but perhaps Emma can also add her thoughts.
Yeah, great question. I think, as I mentioned in my talk, I think, we face, a myriad of different issues. And I think, we've got to look at taking a bit more of a systems approach that, joins all of these things up, really. I think we've ended up quite siloed in our approach to tackling some of these issues. However, I think, river buffers is easy to understand. It's easy to build a campaign around, and it will, it is a fairly simple solution to some of those complex issues. So totally agree. I think it needs to be built into a wider you know, it's not just the only solution, but it's a very good one to bring on not only, you know, farmers, landowners, but also, you know, the public, and build a campaign and momentum behind.
Okay, have you anything to add, Emma? Or
I think I'd just add really that, I mean, for us as a farm cluster, looking at rivers and river buffers, it adds that real physical symbol of connectivity between land holdings. So it's quite a nice focus to pull farmers together around. But I think because farmers, you know, they're very aware of how water moves in a landscape, we're dealing with that when we're managing our areas. I think actually for us, we kind of view as the river is this sort of central vein, but you've got your streams, your ditches, your other water courses, you've got your land drains. So I think for farmers and landowners are pretty good at seeing quite holistically how the water moves across the landscape. So I think they are willing to see whatever we do in the river kind of buffer zones linking to other interventions sort of on farm. I know in Essex in particular, we're just currently working with the county council looking at a local nature recovery strategy, and sort of they're looking at potentially 100 metres either side of the river being a priority area for nature recovery, and there's some arguments to push that to 200 metres. So I think it's looking at that kind of wider landscape, but I think rivers are still a really good symbol of connectivity through a landscape that you can bring people on board around a project.
no, I think that's really important. So thanks, Emma. So if I'm going to go to some of the questions put into the Q&A now, and we've got one from Tom Gore, and he has said, considering the upcoming general election, what does the panel think a new government could do more to unlock the barriers to nature-based solutions?
I can jump in there.
Yep.
Yeah, really interesting question. You know, firstly, I think it's pretty tragic, isn't it, that, you know, the biggest threat to our world has been politicized and, you know, exploited by populism to create kind of that divide. However, I think there's two main things that any government can do. I think firstly is, and I actually do think, you know, the main two political parties are actually quite aligned to this, but you know, I think create long-term policies that go beyond political cycles. And as I said, and I keep going on about, is create those more joined up approaches. And I especially welcome the kind of land use framework to help kind of guide that. And I also think the second main thing is to enable a decentralized model. We know all landscapes and catchments are different and require different approaches, and we must, you know, enable a system that allows local decision making and community input.
Thank you. Have any of the other panelists got anything to add?
I think just from a farmer's perspective, farmers have been in a sort of limbo situation quite a while now, going from single farm payment and that system of support onto ELMS, and the details of ELMS are coming out now, and some of those strands are becoming business as usual within Natural England, and so I think farmers just really need that assurance that when and if there is a change of government, that ELMS strands, as we're now becoming accustomed to them, that they will continue. And I think always we find that farmers would like systems to be more simplified when they're trying to access stewardship support for work along our rivers. But perhaps that's where things like farm clusters come in, because they can be that kind of middleman of support, going out and encouraging uptake and helping be the sort of conduit to get farmers on board where they might be put off by barriers like paperwork, that kind of thing. That's where your farm clusters can come in and really interpret that for farmers and get the uptake up.
Yeah, it's certainly been a time of uncertainty for farmers, so anything that gives a bit of certainty going forward will be welcome, I think. Thank you. And so we have another question, and this is for Emma actually, so don't go away. Amy Brower has said that they've been facilitating farm cluster groups in their Irwell catchment for a few years, but they would love the farm clusters to be more farmer-led. And what would your advice be on how they can secure that?
So I think a farm-led cluster, we know, kind of works quite well because you've already shortcutted some of the barriers to getting farmers on board because you know the industry. I think if you can find someone within the farming community that could perhaps see running a farm cluster as a farm diversification for their business, that's sort of how it's kind of worked a bit here, and it works well. So we see running the farm cluster as one of a number of things we do as a farm business, and we were able to attract some seed funding to get the farm cluster up and running. So we do have a paid coordinator role for our farm cluster, and that's done by a farming family. That's sort of worked well for us here. I think it's about looking as well, what can your farm cluster deliver to get that funding for a coordinator place? What can your farm cluster deliver in the way of services that some of the other NGOs, local authority are looking to deliver? And can you pull little bits of funding from each of those pots together to get a kind of coordinator role that can then be hosted within a farm or farm business in your catchment? So I think that kind of model of, is a paid role, but it's being done by someone from within the farming community, kind of works quite well if you can get that funding pulled together.
I might just jump in there as well. I think, I personally think that farm clusters are absolutely fundamental in delivering environmental markets. We're involved with a number of environmental-led markets, including things like the Resilient Glendamakkin project, and we use the farm cluster group to help co-design what those projects look like. So actually get farmers making those decisions, get them fully embedded in what that looks like, I think is really key, because at the end of the day, my view is always that farmers are the solution, not just the problem.
Okay, thank you. We're running quite short on time now, but I will ask just one more question, and that it will be Luke Ridley has asked, do we have a good understanding of the cumulative value benefits which a really widespread network of river buffers could bring, similar to the hedgerow network? So it benefits connectivity and islands for wildlife in the landscape. And are we making that argument well enough? So could more be done? Could we be more persuasive? And yeah, was that Emma?
No, it was me. It was Kat. I think without a doubt we could be doing more. I think that we do have an understanding and we do have evidence, but the habitat regulations, which makes reference to the value of river corridors, so I think it's there. But yes, I definitely think that we could be doing more, and not just looking at it from sort of the one perspective. It's been interesting listening to the range of talks that we've just had. I think we can come at it from lots of different directions, and we'll be able to have a bigger impact.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think I mentioned a few of those kind of key benefits that those river buffer can deliver if we deliver it kind of a national scale. Things like deliver against a lot of our public commitments, like nature recovery targets, 30 by 30. Net zero, etc., etc. I think what really needs to happen is a very strong campaign behind it, and getting everybody kind of behind it and advocating for it, because I think that's how we kind of get it onto the agenda. But yeah, I think the evidence case is pretty much there, really. I think it's now of like, how do we unlock the mechanism to finance it?
I think that's right. I think if you're thinking about the farmed landscape, if you're focusing on the rivers and waterways, they're areas that are already in existence. You're not asking farmers to take productive land out. It's there, it's something that's there and ready for improvement and to be worked with. And I think farmers are really comfortable with the idea of hedgerow restoration and creation as being a real network. And I think it's absolutely right. Probably the research is there, but the promotion of the benefits that we can have in those waterway spaces is something that needs to be pushed a bit more.
Yeah, I definitely think we need to promote and educate, get it out there so it's higher up the public agenda and perception. But yeah, thank you very much, and I'm sorry that we can't get to all of the questions. And I would like to thank all of our panelists today, Dan, Emma and Kat, for some really interesting talks and discussion that followed. And I'm sure that we will try to put some answers to the questions that have been made going forward. So I would like to thank everyone again, and I will bring this session to a close.
Thank you, Dianne, and thank you to our other speakers this afternoon. And thank you to the audience for bearing with us through a couple of technical issues there. Hopefully, you know, touch wood, that's all the technical issues behind us for the day. Famous last words, I hope not. And just to reiterate that Karen Gibbs from the Consumer Council for Water does send her apologies. I was on the phone to her during that session, but we do have her slides, so we'll be able to share Karen's slides with the other slides after the event. And if you want to find out in more detail about the work that she was going to be sharing, you can do that if you just do an internet search for Consumer Council for Water and Keen to Go Green. It's all about the kind of public support for nature-based solutions, particularly water industry customers. So just a few minutes late for our lunch break, but at 2 o'clock, we'll be back in the next session about empowering farmers and land managers for cleaner waterways, a panel session led by Joanna Braniff from our All Ireland team. For now, I hope you have a lovely lunch break and maybe get a chance to go outside if the weather's not too bad. And yeah, I will see you at 2 o'clock. Thanks very much.